Hey everybody, welcome back to My Wings of Refuge. I'm here with Miss Hot Lips. And today we want to talk a little bit about kombucha. And Hot Lips is a fan of kombucha, not because she drinks it really, but because she loves the SCOBYs. Isn't that right, Hot Lips? You love SCOBYs? So today we're going to talk about what all of that is and what it means. So, what is kombucha? Well, kombucha is a fermented green and or black tea. Some people will use other teas also when they're making it. When people hear the word fermented, sometimes it scares them. There's no reason to be afraid. When you think about the fermentation process, a lot of people will say, oh, but that means it's an alcoholic drink. It's not an alcoholic drink. Now, it might have minuscule amounts of alcohol in them, but it's really comparable to apple cider vinegar, kimchi, other fermented things that you probably already eat on a fairly regular basis. So don't worry about alcohol content. Anybody of any age can buy it in the grocery store. Look, if you can make a pot of sweet tea, that's really all. But you want to add a cup of ugly white sugar for every gallon that you're making. Now, I am not a fan of ugly white sugar. I only buy it to feed my SCOBYs in making the kombucha and to feed my bees and the hummingbirds and also my sourdough starter for my sourdough bread. So those things feed on that sugar. They need that to live. They need that for the fermentation process, but they eat it all up. So when we're testing our kombucha to see if it's ready yet, one of the things we test for is it still sweet? Because if it is, it's not ready. The more sour, the more like apple cider vinegar it is, the more ready it is. In fact, the more sour you can stand, the better it is for you. So what is kombucha other than a fermented drink? Why would you drink fermented tea? It's because it is loaded with probiotics and good bacteria and yeast. So to make this, you have to have a SCOBY. That stands for a symbiotic colony of bacteria and yeast. So yes, it's loaded with bacteria and yeast, but it's the good stuff. It's what your gut needs, it's what your body needs to aid in digestion, it makes you feel energized. It is anti-cancer, anti-aging, because you're cooking out basically all of the sugar in it. It's really not a sweet drink. To make it more palatable, we're adding a little bit of real fruit juice. Now, I try to buy all organic, real fruit juice, and you look at the ingredients. You want to look to make sure there's not added sugars in your juice. Now, for a quart jar, I add about 1/3 to 1/4 of a cup of real fruit juice, or you can use fresh fruit. Either one, you can just mash that fruit up, pop it in there. That's all for the second fermentation. So let's go a rundown through this, how this works. You make your pot of tea and you add in your sugar. You let it simmer so that the sugar is dissolved. You get out your tea bags, squeeze them really good because you want all that goodness in your pot. Then you need a big pot, or I call them a vat, a big vat to put it in. To let it age, to let it ferment. This is the first fermentation process. All you're doing is putting that sweet tea in there and you're going to let it age. But you're going to add a cup of a plain kombucha just to get that cycle going, to get it fermenting, and so that it can feed off of that sugar. And you're going to add in a SCOBY. The first SCOBY we ever added, we ordered it from Sunshine. And you let it age for about 2 weeks. You test it when you're approaching that time frame. You can taste it at any point. It's not going to hurt you. Everything is totally edible at every stage. If it's sweet, let it ferment some more. If it tastes really sour, that's okay. If it's too sour to drink, you can add a little bit more of your fruit juice. And so that's how you balance it. So once it's sat there and it's aged for about 2 weeks, then we pour it into jars, our quart jars, not this one, but a quart jar with about 1/3 to 1/4 of a cup of juice or fruit. And then you put the lid on that and you just let it sit for another 1 to 4 days. I like to do it about 3 days. That's the second fermentation process. That allows what juices you're adding to commingle with that kombucha, the plain kombucha. And some people say it adds a little bit more carbonation. The longer you let it go, it does, but the longer you let that second fermentation go, also the more bitter it can be, or sour. So I let it sit for about 3 days. I let it sit on the counter there in my kitchen, out of direct sunlight. And then after about day 3, I store it in the refrigerator. I have a glass every morning. Sometimes if I've done a lot of yard work, I like to have a glass in the evening. If I've had a really heavy, like Mexican food meal or pizza or something like that, awesome time for a kombucha because it helps that digestion process. You won't feel near as heavy. You won't have the stomach discomforts. If you've been around someone with a stomach virus, because if you think about the stomach virus, it has those bad bacterias and it overrides the good bacteria in your gut. So this has your good bacteria, which you need to put back into your gut. People say, oh, but I take a probiotic. Good for you. I think we should be taking probiotics. But I can look and watch mine grow. I know it's alive and I see it growing because every vat we make of kombucha, it grows a whole new SCOBY. So that little bitty disc the very first time grew into the size of our container. And so the next time we put that big huge SCOBY in the vat, and it grew another one on top of it. So you'll see in this video how we pull them apart. We save the good one, put it back in the vat for the next batch. The other one, I put in a little SCOBY hotel. And what do you do with those? You may be watching this video saying, hey, I wish I had a SCOBY. I'm going to call Shannon and she's going to bring me a SCOBY so I can make my own. And that's what my SCOBY hotel gets full, I get out a couple, I cut them up with scissors because they're pretty thick. I cut them up with scissors and I feed them to my chickens. My chickens love SCOBY. another thing you can do when you're making your kombucha is play around with flavors. I went from my first batch being like pomegranate and grape and maybe apple to adding in some fun. With that apple, I started adding in a cinnamon stick, and in the fall I added in some cloves and some allspice. With the pomegranate, I've added in some dried hibiscus flowers. This time with the pear, I added in some dried tea, herbal tea that is made up of just berries and I believe lemongrass. And so when you add that in there, it gives it this beautiful kick of flavor. And so I love doing that. And my husband made me so happy when he came back home from Washington, D.C. recently. And he came home with some big, huge bags of tea from the spice and tea store or something like that. And it's something that I can use just a tiny bit, maybe even a teaspoon in a quart jar mixed with just maybe a fourth of a cup of apple or pear juice or something like that. Man, does it change the flavor. Rose petals. There's so many different things that you can do just to splash up and play with those flavors. So I encourage you to play with that. Also, last year I made watermelon. Now, I bought frozen watermelon from the grocery store, but this year I'm actually going to take a fresh watermelon and then cut it all up and put it in there instead of the juice and see how that goes. Cantaloupe, mash up some cantaloupe, put in there, some blueberries, some raspberries, any of those things, and I just know it will be awesome. So have fun with it, enjoy it, and my drink of choice, hey, I don't drink alcohol, but I do drink kombucha. Have a great day, y'all. Until I see you again, have a glass of kombucha.